former valedictorian of Borrego Springs High School in honor of Lorne, Jimmy Smith, an ABF trustee and Air Force retired, and other members of the American Legion Post 853. Presenting of the colors is being done by American Legion Post 853 and members of the Department of Parks and Recreation Color Guard. Denise, if you would come forward. Our national anthem is going to be sung by a sophomore student from Borrego Springs High School, Denise Cecena.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If I could have Samantha, Claire, come forward to help us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right shoulder, arms. All out, place the flags. Forward, march. Till halt. Place the flags.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Kathy Dice. I'm the State Park Superintendent of Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. On behalf of California State Parks, I would like to welcome the Bier family, State Parks Director Lisa Magnat and her executive staff, State Parks family members, present and past, and the community of Borrego Springs, to the memorial for Ranger Steve and Arthur Bier. Heidi, Lorne, Mr. David Bier, Allan and Shelley, our hearts are with you. I can tell you for sure that Ranger Steve would not have wanted any of this today, or any day. But since this is really for all of us that are here, the one demand he might have made is that we be outdoors with a nice view of the desert he loves. He wore long-sleeved uniform shirts and long pants year-round and took pride in being a true desert rat. He used to tell people riding along with him that he was using the air conditioner only for their comfort. So today we are all outside sweating in his honor. I met Steve within a year of his arrival at Ocotillo Wells State Vehicle Recreation Area as a newly minted ranger out of the Ben Clark Academy class of 2002. I was a supervising ranger here, and we worked on some rescues and law enforcement incidents that would happen near the shared borders of Ocotillo Wells and Anza-Borrego. I was impressed that he seemed to know his park so well in such a short time and knew how to find and get to even the most obscure locations in this desert. Not only that, but often after all the debris was cleared, Steve would show us some nearby amazing desert resource he had discovered during his patrols. When I arrived at Salton Sea State Recreation Area as the sector superintendent, Steve had already been working there for several months. Once again, I was impressed with the depth and the breadth of his knowledge of not only the Salton Sea, but of the entire surrounding area. He worked hard to undo and explain the myths about the Salton Sea in his time there and had fun doing it. He worked with staff on land and sea and even in the trenches when a project called for it. The staff adored him, of course. A few years later, in 2009, I returned to Anza-Borrego Desert State Park to step into the role of superintendent. Once again, I met up with Ranger Steve, who had transferred to this park in 2007. I know it might look like I was stalking him. I swear I wasn't. However, I do think that by this time we recognized that each of us harbored an old soul and loved this desert for all it had to offer. It had become home in heart, mind, spirit, and fact. He was already well on his way to becoming the Mr. Anza-Borrego that we all know and love. Steve graduated from the West Valley College Park Management Program in 2000. There are some members of the school here, and I wanted to recognize that. Thank you for being here today. Definitely his mentors. He then became a state park ranger at the age of 35, which means that he had a whole other life, or maybe several, before he came to us. Personally, I believe that everything in that previous life led him to the career he loved best and was meant to do, that of a ranger ambassador to California State Parks. He was the go-to guy for so many things that he already knew so much about. Animal rescue, geology, emergency medicine, and firefighting, just to list a few. And being a big kid himself and interested in everything from bighorn sheep to ants, he was also a natural at interpretation and working with children. He actively helped our 5th grade camp, brought science to elementary and middle school students, and when in our sister park, Iknart, he played Pied Piper to the Mongolian children, who then also became junior rangers. I would be remiss not to mention that he captured the world in his camera lens, from bugs hiding in wildflowers to the vast desert landscapes. Many of his photos are captured on our new interpretive panels found throughout the park. But a more astonishing gift is the trove of photos in our files that will keep on giving to generations of interpretive programming. Clearly, Ranger Steve loved his job. Every morning he would go in service by saying he was playing ranger in Anza-Borrego. He even wrote that in his patrol log, playing ranger in whatever place he was. How lucky is that, to love what you do so much that it feels like play? Steve was the consummate generalist ranger, perhaps even what we would call a Renaissance ranger, excellent in all aspects of the state park peace officer position. He had an eye for detail and knew more about this place than many of us who have been here our entire career. I don't think I discovered anything he could not do. And including switching from interpretive to law enforcement mode and back again as needed. He was the first to volunteer for any task that came along, and I have to admit that I depended on him for many things because it was just so easy. Figure out park boundaries and post signs, done. Move a snake, done. Run the annual 4th of July Bighorn sheep count, done. Hike up Palm Canyon to assist an injured hiker or do some trail work, done. Do a program for International Ranger Day in the middle of summer and 110 degrees, done. Do a program for kids, done. Do wildlife rescue, done. Talk to CBS News, done. You will find him all over the internet and in many written articles because he was willing and comfortable talking with anyone, even in front of a camera, bless him. He was one of the only rangers who volunteered his time with our park partners, Anza-Borrego Foundation, and patrolled the UCI Research Center, another of our partners, on his way to Fish Creek. He watched for migrating flocks of Swainson hawks for Hawk Watch. He loved working with our park volunteers. But mainly, it was all about the resources of this park. Steve was truly interested in everything. He dedicated his whole self to this desert and its treasure. The only thing more important to him was his family. Remember that you, Lorne, were the center of his universe. For you and your mom, he would hang the sun and the moon. He loved you that much. Never forget. For these reasons and many more, everyone here today most likely feels a personal connection with Steve. And we all feel bereft and brokenhearted. There seems to be holes in all parts of our park operation and our community. Most of us who look around today see Steve in every part of this park, and right now it is painful. I want to remind you, especially the peace officers, his most cherished of co-workers, that when everyone else is running away, we are running toward the emergency, the fire, the pain. So run towards this desert and embrace it. You will find your reward there. Steve preached the awe-inspiring value of this place and would not want anything less of you. I urge you to find something about Steve that inspired you, each of you, and incorporate that into your life and your work. I know that following in those large footsteps, size 13 would be my guess, will be daunting. But I dare you to take a leaf from the Ranger Steve manual. In my humble opinion, the world could use more generalist Renaissance Rangers, kids growing up to be scientists, and people working to protect the environment. Steve, you wore your Stetson proudly and with honor. I am grateful to have been your colleague and your friend. Rest easy, Ranger Steve. We will do our best to take it from here. We love you and will forever miss you and your gifts. I would now like to call on Steve's brother Allan, who I hope might fill us in on some of the details of the before of Ranger Steve.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank Kathy and everyone in the park system, everyone who had any part in setting up this beautiful arrangement today. I don't know how to say thank you. I also wanted to have Lorne say a couple words about his dad. Have a whole back history on Steve that I'm sure you're all dying to hear. And this is my son Griffin, and I thought maybe he'd like to say just a couple of quick things too about his uncle. Say what you like to say.
Alright, we know my dad loved the desert. I mean, come on, he would literally go out and he would see one little thing and he's like, oh, let me take a picture. Oh my god, that was so interesting. Let me show my family. And then there would be the other side where he'd love his jokes and puns. Like, he would literally, if he just met you, there would be a point where he acted like he knew you his whole life. And then he'd start making these puns and jokes, and you'd be like, yeah, we're definitely being friends. So then, the part that I loved about my dad was that I loved playing my video games, and then he'd make these jokes about video games and all that. Like, okay. For Christmas, I asked for an Xbox. So he said, okay, I'll go home, I'll draw an X on a box, and then you can have it. And I would yell at him and I would say, no, I want an actual Xbox. And he's like, yes, I will give you an X on a box. That's what you want, right? And then there was a side where I would complain and be like, oh, I don't want to go hiking. And then my dad would be like, you don't want to go hiking? But it's such a beautiful desert. It's better than those reality deserts or whatever you play. And then he would make these jokes of how he's an old man and he can hear very well. And then you'd be like, no, you're not. And he'd say, what did you say? I can't hear you. Could you repeat that? So my dad was a very courageous man. Everyone loved him. Like, the second you met him, you would literally fall in love with him because he was hilarious. And then he'd start hanging out with you more, he'd start going hiking with you, he'd do everything that he'd want to do with you, and you guys would just have fun, and it'd be amazing. The final thing I want to say is, my dad was not only courageous, not only funny, but he was brave and kind-hearted. If that's even a word, I don't know. But he, in the deepest situations, he would be right there for you. You called him, he'd be there, he'd be trying to help you as best as he could. And if he couldn't help you, he tried to bring more people into the situation so they could help even more. And that was the great part about him. No matter what day it was, no matter what week it was, no matter what hour it was, no matter where, he always made people feel like they were special. He made them feel like they were top key in the world and they could help anyone. They could be anyone and they could act like anyone. And even if you tried to be like him and make a horrible joke, it'd still be a good joke to him. I thank you for your time. Enjoy the day.
Oh, no, we're good. Sorry. Okay. I have not seen my Uncle Steve that much in the past 10 years because I think he was so dedicated to the park system that he couldn't take himself to leave, but we would take trips to Palm Springs every 2 years and they would come down, the whole family, and I would get to see him. And Steve was really the embodiment of the funny uncle. I think everyone says they have a funny uncle, and he was the goofball that I knew. And over the past few weeks, I've been gathering photos of him through old family albums. And I was really touched to see that in a lot of photos, there was little picture of me, and he was always there holding me with a huge smile on his face, a goofy grin. And I really think that showed that he loved children, and I knew he was a great father, and I really wish I had gotten to know him and come visit the park. And I definitely will take the opportunity now to do that. So, I miss you, Steve. So I want to apologize in advance because emotions get the best of me, so if you hear some cracking, it's the best I can do. And I want to thank all you folks who came out here today. I know it's hot. Maybe not hot for you, but it's damn hot for me. So really what I'm here to do is to talk about the early years. I think I have the best information in that regard, and I wrote about a 4-chapter novel here. Hopefully you have a couple hours. So Steve was born on May 8th, 1966. He was the first grandchild. I wasn't there, but everyone says he was spoiled, and I believe it. There's stories told that when I came along, he was trying to put a pillow over my head, or something similar. It was all comforting. Yeah. But Steve was born in Kaiser Hospital in San Francisco. That's where we were born and raised. I was born in the very same hospital, but 3 years later. He was the pride and joy of David Arthur and Eileen Evelyn Bier, our grandparents Horace Arthur and Jeanette Marie Bier, and our other grandfather Morris Nunn Bier. And there's a whole story behind that I won't share today, but it was kind of funny. We grew up on Flournoy Street in San Francisco in 2 different houses. The first house was my grandfather's house, where my parents lived upon their marriage, and unfortunately the loss of our grandmother. Then our parents bought a house 4 doors down in 1973 when my sister Shelley came about. The little house, 970 square feet, 3 bedrooms. Steve and I shared the front bedroom until the late 80s when he joined the Air Force. We were quite different in our interests, really, but that didn't show in the early years. We would play tag, hide and seek, football, cowboys and Indians. I know that's not PC, but we did. Directly across the street from our house at that point in time, there was 2 lots that they never built houses on. And we would go play in there. That was our jungle. We'd also go a couple blocks up the hill, which is the town of Daly City, and it was a hill. We called it Kite Hill. And we'd get cardboard, we'd slide down the hill, climb up the rocky edge, and it was kind of like climbing the volcanic mountains, maybe like Kilimanjaro, something like that. The most memorable thing that we would do there was we'd catch alligator lizards, fence lizards, which we called blue-belly lizards, gardener snakes. We'd take them home, and we always bought cheap fish tanks, and we'd put them in there from garage sales for $1 or $2. I think this was our most enjoyable time. It was really an innocent time. We had no responsibilities. We were just being kids. It was all right. Like I said, we had many pets when we were kids. We had dogs, cats. In our room, you could find the lizards and the snakes, and later that became birds. At one point in time, in our little bedroom, we had 13 birds tucked in between our bunk beds. Yeah, he did. He loved animals. I'm going to show my age here a little bit, but when we were this small, we had a 13-inch black and white television in our room. It had a dial to change the channels. And rabbit ears. I don't know, not real rabbit ears, but TV rabbit ears for you guys who don't know what those are. We could tune in 11 channels. I still remember the day, and I wish I could really share this moment with you, because this was a constant talk back and forth within the families when we bought a video cassette recorder after we determined the Sony Betamax was dead. We bought the front-loading one, not the top-loading one. It was top of the line. It was a great day. That way we could record our films and rewatch them.
My fondest memories of early TV was watching repeats of Star Trek, where our pop, he knew all the lines of all the characters. We'd watch Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom with zoologist Marlin Perkins as host. To me, he looked like Walt Disney, but I think Steve really admired him. We'd also watch The Muppet Show. That was more my thing. But both Steve and I related to Fozzie Bear, and I think if you knew Steve, you'd understand that. He'd be the first one to throw out a waka waka waka. Our pop was the consummate joker. It wasn't uncommon to have a few fart jokes at the dinner table, followed by Mom laughing and her saying, "Not at the dinner table." Dad would smirk at approval of our joke and then, "Listen to your mother." To this day, I still love the Muppets and I miss the dinner table. TV was great until Steve fell in love with an angel. Her name was Farrah Fawcett. I lost him. He had the pillow people. We spent many of our weekends as kids going to garage sales looking for deals. There was 3 of us in the back seat. Our parents would leave us in the car, and almost always someone was crying when they returned. We would fight and fight. He touched me, she touched me. He looked at me funny, blah, blah, blah. Our parents would tell us, "Can't you just get along?" And really the answer was not in confined spaces. Why did we fight so much? I really wish I could answer that, and on this day I really wish Steve was here to answer it as well. Our parents came from different religious backgrounds. We were non-practicing in all accounts. I like to say we were raised on the religion of right and wrong. We would always try to do the right thing. If a neighbor went away and we were asked to feed their pets while they were gone, you always did it out of kindness. We were told never to accept payment, no matter the amount. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's ingrained in us Bier kids, and I have passed it on to mine. One note on this point is that the side effect of this good deed is that you may lack the ability to accept compliment. I know this to be true, and I think Steve would concur. We put our heart and soul into our work and our best, very best at relationships, but acknowledging a good job well done is something that doesn't come naturally to a Bier. We didn't always do right. Here comes some of the good stories, people. That's all right. A story I like to tell is the roller skate story. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and Mom had to budget things. We bought everything with coupons to get by. We went to annual sales to save. If you can recall the Mervyn stores, they had a once-a-year shoe sale of the display shoes at the Ceremony Mall. They would lay out this big table, 20, 30 feet of table. They had a once-a-year shoe sale. They would lay out all the shoes, and you had to select single shoes by model and size and put a pair together. Once you did so, you were able to buy them for $2. Mom thought that we could handle 2 pairs of shoes in the first half of the school year. I'm sorry, I lose the mic when I look this way, but I feel like I'm not acknowledging everyone. And then for the second part of the school year, she'd buy a couple pairs of shoes a little bit larger, half size larger. Our feet grew really fast in our family. As you heard Kathy say, size 13, it's the truth. And you know, Steve would say, you know what you say about people with large feet? They need large shoes. He was the first one to say that. Anyway, we would go to this mall, and we would spend literally hours trying to put pairs of shoes together to buy for $2. One year, we also got roller skates. And we lived on a street. On either side was a hill at the corner. So since skates work so great when you're small, you take one of them. You sit on the skate, and those wonderful $2 tennis shoes, great brakes. So unfortunately, they didn't last when you used them in this fashion. To be brief, Mom was not happy, made us wear the worn shoes for a couple days before replacing them. So that's that story. But we kept busy socially. We were pretty good kids. We were in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and attended Scout jamborees. In the summer, Mom wanted us out of the house, and at the time, San Francisco Park and Rec Department offered many services. We went to day camp. They kept us entertained and out of Mom's hair. The first camp we went to was Silver Tree Day Camp, located in the Glen Park area of the city. It was great. We would have activities, and they always cooked a hot lunch that was camp food, beans, franks, spaghetti, good kid food. We would have nature hunts and earn points for critters we would bring back, and of course Steve always knew where the snakes were. At the park, they would put you in different groups, and we were always identified by the color of the bandana. We always went for yellow. I don't have a good reason for telling that, but it was always important to us. During the week, we would be assigned an act, and at week's end, the parents would come for an evening social, and we'd toast marshmallows and sing songs. Our favorite skit was what was called the egg shampoo. Basically, we'd get 3 people on stage. 1 egg was real, and 2 of them were drained. And so 1 person got an egg shampoo, in other words. A couple years later, Mom sent us to another camp located in the Sunset District called Stern Grove. There was a pond with small fish and crawdads. We'd get to catch those. And they would alternate on each week. 1 week we'd get to go to the zoo, the San Francisco Zoo. We loved it. We'd also get to go to the pool swimming. The thing about the San Francisco Zoo, we would always go taunt the chimpanzee and wait for him to throw poop at us. That was the joy. Excuse me, let me get a drink. At around 13, Steve and I got a paper route, delivering the Daily City Record. We had to deliver it rain or shine, twice a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We also had to collect money by knocking on people's doors. In most cases, they would tell us the check's in the mail, give us some candy or an apple. It was okay to take it at that point in time, boys and girls, not on Halloween. We were never so happy than the time we received our very first check, $35. We were rich. We were rich. We did it for a while. Steve got bored, and I kept doing it, but Mom would drive me around. That was our first venture into employment. Steve was an excellent student. He had a photographic memory. If he read it, it was stored. He could recall almost everything that interested him and never had to study for tests. He, however, was slow to grow in height, and we get picked on a lot in school. Growing up in the city, you had no choice but to fight or run. I remember him coming home from school after being robbed of his bus fare. He had a lot of pride, but some of these guys he went to school with were just too big and too tough. As a teen, trying to fit in was difficult. Steve did have a handful of friends in high school. Their names were Brad, Ernest, and John. I really wish they were here today to share in this celebration. I remember one time when Steve let me tag along to the movies with these friends at the Tanforan Mall. We were stopped by security, who told us that we looked like a gang, and we'd have to split up. No more than 3 people walking at a time together. Can you imagine Ranger Steve looking like a gangster? There's some pictures around. If you saw the fro he was carrying in the 80s, he looked like trouble. He later went on to City College and did well. I remember he took up archery, was a crack shot. He could shoot straight no matter if it was a gun, an arrow, or his opinion. Our grandparents always lived in a rural town. When we were small, they lived near Napa Valley in Oakville. Later in a small town called Middletown in Lake County. It's an old stagecoach town between Lower Lake and Calistoga, California. There was not much there, a grocery, a 5 and dime, few other stores. We would search with the grand folks. Every once in a while we'd go out searching for Lake County diamonds. That was fun. Those were a small quartz, but that was to get us out of the house. We would swim in the ponds with tadpoles, but most of the time we would sit out in the dark, wait for dark to come, and just sit outside and watch the stars. That was special. Sitting in folding chairs just like you folks today. There we learned about the Big and Little Dipper, shooting stars, other constellations. In his adult years, Steve remained closer to our grandparents than anyone else in our family, and I wish they were here to share in this as well. Prior to becoming a ranger, he trained as a firefighter in the U.S. Air Force. After the service, Steve was an animal technician at several different animal hospitals. He started in Texas, and when he relocated back to San Francisco, he took on several different positions, trying to find himself, but ultimately went back to caring for animals. Our mother passed away, unfortunately, in 1999. That sent all our lives into a spiral. I know this is where Steve decided to become a ranger. He always felt he was too old to start the educational process. But loss changes people, just as we're changed here today. I remember the phone call from Steve when Mom was in the hospital after collapsing at work. He said, "It's Mom." I remember rushing to San Francisco General and gathering with the family. My son was celebrating his 4th birthday, and Mom called us that morning to sing happy birthday. That was our last interaction. I just had a birthday a couple weeks ago, and damn it, if my last interaction wasn't Steve giving me a call singing me happy birthday. But people, this is a celebration, so I'd like to end it with, I think, my best laughable moment. Ranger Steve was not always that cool guy who went by the name of Esteban Cerveza. My pops, Steve, and I were hunting in the Marble Mountains near Wairika and the Oregon border. We had to pack in several hours to our spot, and we had freeze-dried noodles with tuna for dinner. It was Steve's job to clean the pot that contained our meal, and it was getting dark, and he chose to save it for the next day. We were tired and let it be. Well, a couple hours later, a black bear came for the leftovers. We were sleeping in a 3-man tent, Pop to the right, Steve to the left, and me in the middle. I was scared. Steve said, "Why are you scared? You're in the middle. The bear will eat Dad or me first." All you have to do is run like hell and hope his family isn't out there. Dad decided to let out a warning shot to shoo the bear away. It worked. Steve jumped out of the tent and tossed the pot as far as he could. The bear did come back, and we could hear him searching for the pot. The next morning, we found the now oval pot licked clean. Needless to say, the bear was happy, and I thought Steve was nuts, but in all honesty, he was fearless. I'll miss him, but I'm happy he shared so much with this community. I hope that his memory lives on with everyone here today. Please tell your friends, your family, and your children, I knew this guy. He taught me about the flowers, the trees, the animals, and damn it, he was funny. Finally, Steve's birthday is in a week, on the 8th. Do me a favor on that day. Please just give him a little happy birthday shout. May he rest in the sky, or wherever he is today. Bless you all, and thank you from the Bier family.
Thank you, Allan, Lorne, and cousin Griffith. Thank you. It's always insightful to learn the other side of somebody's story. We are all a process and a collection of everything that went before. I would next like to ask our State Parks Director, Lisa Magnat, to come to the podium and speak to us. Director.
Good morning, everyone. Our hearts are broken. Ranger Steve Bier, to all of us, embodied every attribute that we hope for in a state park ranger. As a ranger, he took an oath to protect all of us and the parks and everything in it. When others run from danger, Ranger Bier promised to run to it and to help all of us. And it wasn't just an oath to Ranger Bier. Ranger Bier demonstrated his commitment to that oath through acts of compassion, courage, and heroism throughout his career with us. When people found themselves in their greatest time of need, Ranger Bier was there for him. He was our hero. And he also had the courage, just as importantly, to be silly with all of us, because he knew that by making us laugh, he would put us at ease, and we would listen to him and learn. And we would learn about his passion for the great outdoors and everything in it. And because of his passion, his dedication, and his humor, we remember his lessons through all of his stories. He was a model ranger, what we lovingly refer to as a ranger's ranger, a state park's iconic ranger, and we knew it. You may have heard Superintendent Kathy Dice in the past talk about how she wished she could have cloned Ranger Bier, and so many of us felt that way. But we did the next best thing. We had him participate in training of our newest cadets for over a decade. And if you joined the ranks of State Parks Ranger for California over that last decade, you were trained by the best, Ranger Bier, and how to be an iconic state ranger. He reminded our cadets that through interpretation they could make deep, meaningful connections with the public, and connecting people with their parks and imparting in them a sense of collective stewardship. To the students that he taught, did you know that Ranger Bier, the times that he spent with you, it was his day off? It was not required of him as part of his job. That's how important all of you were to him. He imparted in each of you his magic and wonder about the great outdoors. And while it may seem like a long time away before you know it, believe me, you will be an adult, just like the rest of us. And all of this will be yours to care for. Ranger Bier knew that, and he was preparing each and every one of you. To the community and our partners, thank you for sharing your stories and rallying around our parks family. It has meant so much to all of us. Knowing how much the community cares for Ranger Bier, how much the community cares for his family and his coworkers has meant so much to the department, spread throughout the great state of California, and it made it just a little bit easier for all of us that were located so far away in the state. So thank you so very much for that. And to Ranger Bier's family, thank you for sharing him with us. Know that we have been made better for him having spent time with us, and we are forever changed, not just personally, but as an organization. You are forever part of the Parks family, and we hope that you will always remember the great admiration that we have for your son, your brother, your husband, and most importantly, your father. And to his son, I just want to share with you that the Parks family will always be looking out for you and celebrating your success and watching over you as you build an amazing life as your father did. And to California State Park staff, this is just, right now it feels like an incomprehensible loss for the state parks system and as an organization. But each of the parks family throughout the park system embraces all of you during this most difficult time. And we will work together as we move forward to honor Steve, his legacy, and the values that he imparted on everyone who had the great opportunity and benefit to move in his orbit. Through his life, Ranger Steve demonstrated the difference that one man could make on a landscape, and on a community, and on a family, and on an organization, and on his colleagues. He's a reminder of the difference one man and one life can make on all of us, the difference one life can make. One great man, a brother, a son, a husband, a father, a teacher, a protector of the great outdoors, a lover of puns, an ambassador for Anza-Borrego, an ambassador for California State Parks. State Parks' iconic ranger, a ranger's ranger, Ranger Steve Bier, will forever be with us.
I keep waiting for Steve to make a joke about the bear being attached to the Ocotillo. Somebody help with that. So, next I would like to invite Jim Long, who is a retired ranger, but also most important for us today, he was an interpretive trainer and partner with Steve for many, many years. Jim?
Thanks, Kathy. Can you hear me okay? A little, very quick, my background with Steve. I met him on his first day out of Ben Clark at Asilomar. I have been asked at very short notice to take over the whole interpretive training for that class. So for the next 6 weeks or so, we were together. Meeting Steve instantly, we became friends. We shared an Air Force background, a love of puns, and it was just a privilege to have known him. So, this breeze is, I'm sure Steve is sending this breeze for us. And I would start off by saying good morning. Yeah, it's still good morning. It's with a tear and a smile that I speak to you today. I had a dream a few nights ago, and fleeting and insubstantial as dreams can be, there was a coyote and a roadrunner standing together beneath an old man Ocotillo. Hands clasped, heads bowed, and on the shimmering desert sands below, the words appear. "O Steve, Steve, why hast thou forsaken us?" But in a larger sense, Steve will only be truly gone when no one here remembers him. And judging from your presence and the love shown here today, he's going to be around for a very, very, very long time indeed. He'll probably outlast all of us. Oscar Wilde, the playwright and author, said that life imitates art. I would that that were so, because there's a scene in Tom Sawyer I'd give anything to see played out again right now. And I'm sure, as many of you have just realized, it's when Tom and Huck and Joe Harper, who are believed dead and drowned, they have stolen into the back of the little country church in Hannibal, Missouri, to attend their own funerals. If anybody I have ever known could pull that one off, it would have been Steve. With infinite sorrow, I know he cannot, and yet I sense his soul hangs but a little way above our heads, staying to keep us company. Sherlock Holmes, who actually did manage to pull that off at Reichenbach Falls, but he had a little help from Conan Doyle in coming back, said that talent instantly recognizes genius. Without laying any claim to the former for myself, I will proclaim that for Steve in a heartbeat, and I defy any of you who knew him to say otherwise. Steve had genius. He was no coward of conscience. He excelled at everything he did. He played his many parts to perfection. He could be, and frequently was, as sassy as Brer Rabbit in the Briar Patch. He was, as Eddie Vedroska has said, the consummate funny man. He was all that, yes, but much, much more. It was as if he had stepped right out of the pages of Shakespeare as well as Looney Tunes. He was Falstaff and Mercutio and the Roadrunner combined. He was Puck, and going Hamlet one better, Steve Bier knew a hawk from a handsaw no matter which way the wind was blowing. He was indeed a fellow of infinite jest. And which amongst you can ever forget the brilliance of Professor Itchy Scratchy and a dozen other answering machine messages? I, for one, will never forget them. Shakespeare might very well have been speaking of Steve on the field of Philippi instead of Brutus when he said, "His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to everybody, 'This was a man.'" That was the Steve Bier I knew and loved, the noblest ranger of them all. Shakespeare also wrote of him, "O lamentable day, death lies on him like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field." This also is true. And with the beautiful flowers of the fields, then. But Shakespeare aside, for me, it will forever be the poet Edgar Arlington Robinson who describes Steve best with these immortal lines. "He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim, and he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still, he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked." Hell, Steve, you glittered in everything you did. You were beyond all doubting the best, most talented, most dedicated ranger I ever had the privilege to work with in my 30-year career. And as you well know, I have worked with the best. And so, when your new cell phone gets issued, please make sure I get the number. I'm looking forward to hearing one last message from that undiscovered country you're now patrolling. I'm sure it will be a good one. Good luck, Godspeed. You are indeed such stuff as dreams are made on. Goodbye, so long, au revoir, arrivederci, auf Wiedersehen, until we meet again. Good night, sleep well, and may many, many flights of angels sing you to your rest. That's all, folks.
Thank you, Jim. So, our next speaker is also a retired state park employee, was a mentor to me, and probably many other people, a special friend of this park, and a cohort on the trips to Mongolia, our sister park Ignart. I'd like to welcome to the podium Lynn Rhodes.
Good morning. It is still morning. Many of us are here today probably thinking about what is life? It is so close. The sound of a stream rushing by, the sun on your shoulders, the flower-kissed mountains and valleys and hills, the songs of birds, and we've heard of the bird story. Birds of every kind and every song. A night sky filled with stars, the wildlife everywhere, some that is seen and some that remains hidden. Steve gave to each of us that quality of life that is and always will be present because it is infinite and everlasting. The California State Park Rangers Association, which I'm here today representing in addition to myself, friend of Steve, recognizes Steve Bier as the consummate ranger, protector, warden, steward, friend, and teacher. What he has cared so deeply for and shared over the years has now become a special part of each one of us. We all have our special stories. We're so fortunate to be able to carry his ever-present smile and his inspiration with us. He gave everything for what he truly loved, and we honor and we thank him for the remarkable gifts that he has given us. Thank you, and it's an honor to be here to be able to speak and share with you today. Thank you.
I hope that today you will take the time to share your stories with each other and share on the storyboard that we have for you in the back. Check out the mementos and photos that might be back there on the clothespins. Write a memory card. Those cards will go to Heidi and Lorne. Even if you just want to sign in to say, hey, I was here and I love you, that would be really welcome. Our final speaker this morning is the man that I came in after, and I never yet have filled his shoes. It would be impossible. I only wear a size 8, and I'm sure probably wear something larger. But anyway, retired superintendent of Anza-Borrego State Park, Mark Jorgensen, was a special friend of Steve's, a mentor to Steve and me both. And I would like to invite him to bring the parting words. Try to keep the bear out of trouble.
Some friends you guys were, I asked about 20 people if they'd come up and read this for me. What the hell was that? Sounded like Microsoft. Lorne, I admire the heck out of you for getting up here and speaking without any notes. I think Heidi and Steve have raised a tremendous, loving son, one who can speak extemporaneously. Personally, I have notes. I actually have two messages, one personal from myself, but one from a group that Steve was a part of here in Borrego Springs, called the Borrego Valley Hawk Watch group. And there's a type of hawk called the Swainson's hawk that migrates, one of the longest migrations on Earth. Every year travels from Argentina and Uruguay all the way up through the Isthmus of Panama and through Mexico, right through Borrego Springs and on to Canada. And they do that every February, March, and April. And in September, October, they turn around and go all the way back. So Hal Cohen is a originator, along with my brother Paul, of the Borrego Valley Hawk Watch. It's been going on for about 15 years. Hal's in Chicago and asked me to share thoughts on behalf of the Hawk Watchers. Steve adopted every Tuesday to go out and be at the Hawk Watch in the north part of the valley and count the hawks that came by. And Hal sent me a note, said Steve will be sorely missed for a multitude of reasons. When Steve couldn't show up to lead the count on his usual Tuesday, I would say it'll take 4 of us to replace you. And I wasn't kidding. Steve had the best eyes for spotting hawks and all wildlife of anybody Hal had ever met and anyone I've ever met. We never did get to share roasted caterpillars. Often we joked about eating caterpillars, and this was the season we pledged to eat them. Next flower season, are you listening, Lorne? Perhaps we will eat them and we will toast Ranger Steve. This one's for you, Steve. Folks were drawn to Steve as he shared his knowledge of the life history of Swainson's hawks and the sphinx moth caterpillars. The Hawk Watch magazine, which is a hawk migration studies publication for all in North America, publishes a write-up for each Hawk Watch done throughout America, and this year's write-up for Borrego Springs will be dedicated to Ranger Steve. It was also Steve who ushered in Audubon magazine to come to Borrego Springs and do research to be published this fall in their magazine issue. Because of Steve, the Borrego Valley Hawk Watch has become an international sensation. We will miss you, Steve. And that's from Hal Cohen. Personal notes, Steve was one of my best friends. We traveled a lot together. We went to Mongolia together 3 times. I saw him at his best, and I saw a lot of his inner thoughts, and we shared a lot. Words, I don't think, are adequate to express what we're all feeling here today. I was gone for about 4 weeks. Just got back a few days ago, and so I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and people are totally at a loss for words. It's come to my mind that the emptiness that's in our hearts can only be filled by the gratitude that we all have for having spent our special time with our dear friend and our brother. Each one of us feels that we were really special when we spent time with him. I have a lot of gratitude for those days and those years. People have expressed their heartfelt condolences to the Bier family, and I share that, especially to Heidi and Lorne. Also to his father and brother and sister. And all I can think is that the heartbreak that we now have will someday be replaced over time with the good memories, all the love that Steve had for his family, that big smile of his, the warm embraces that your husband and father shared with you over the years. And the people here today offer their comfort and love to you, and many here will be here for you for years to come because we feel you are our family. There's an account that's been set up, one through GoFundMe, to help with immediate expenses, and I think that's almost reached its goal of $30,000. And some folks have also set up an account at the Umpqua Bank, the local Borrego bank, in Lorne's name, for Lorne to use for fulfilling his dreams or his future education as he chooses when he becomes 18. So I would really let everybody here know and request that you share a way that we can help Lorne in the future is to help him fulfill his dreams, and if you'll put some generous donation into that account. Some of us are gonna make monthly donations to it. The many school children who are here in this crowd today were Ranger Steve's children. Steve nurtured them, guided them, enlightened them, inspired them, he befriended them, and he opened their eyes to the exciting, complex world around them. These young people will carry Ranger Steve with them for the rest of their lives, as will we all. They will never forget that uniformed ranger who on his days off volunteered to share his world with them in their 5th grade science class. For 7 years he did this, whether as Ranger Steve, Professor Itchy and Scratchy, Barney Fife, or some other off-the-wall character. He used Oreos to help them learn about the planets, gummy bears, teach them about caterpillars, or building volcanoes that erupted inside their classrooms. Steve Bier left this world a better place than he found it. He worked very hard, maybe too hard, to make it better, to help educate us, to lead us by example. He didn't say, come on, I need help. He just said, I'm going to go do such and such. And people would say, well, you can't do that by yourself. I'm going to go help you. He inspired us. Inspired us he did. Whether we were students, folks down at the coffee shop, his co-workers up at the state park, the park volunteers, school employees, the guys changing tires down at the auto shop, the Mongolian Rangers at Anza-Borrego's sister park in the Gobi Desert, all the new Rangers in the academy since 2003, campers out in the park, folks on his nature walk, the staff over at Anza-Borrego Foundation, or people across America or around the world watching him on the CBS Evening News. Ranger Steve was everywhere. I met Steve in 2002 in the State Park Ranger Academy. He thought he was old. I was 15 years older than he was, and it was my second Ranger Academy. We became best friends, and we had a mutual respect for our 15 years together. We admired each other, and we communicated almost every day, whether in person, by text message, or on the phone. I'd get some weird text message from him, shrimp in Clark Lake, which maybe doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, but to me I knew exactly where he was and what he was looking at. Shrimp that had been sitting out there in an egg cast for 10 or 20 or 30 years, and they hatched out. I'd send him one back. His response, since he could never say the word excellent, his response was egg salad. Like, come on, don't be a dork. Once in a while, say excellent. I never heard him say excellent one time. I heard him say egg salad 1,000 times. We traveled together in Mongolia 3 times over the years to share our love of parks with rangers and researchers and the staff at our sister park, Iknart, out in the Gobi Desert. Steve was very much at peace in Mongolia. Last July and August, Steve and Mike Wells, who's here, and I spent 3 glorious weeks in Iknart and Arbor Sands and down at Hustai National Park. And Steve was so much at peace that he actually ate 3 meals a day. He slept through the night, and he even cut his number of puns in half. I always called him the Pied Piper of Mongolia because he was loved by all who came in contact with him. We went into a camp one time for a religious ceremony, and we were met with the wary eyes of Mongol elders. What are these foreigners doing here? The wary eyes became huge smiles when soon they found Ranger Steve pinning California State Park Junior Ranger badges on all the kids prior to a horse race. And pretty soon, everybody was hugging him and mobbing him. The kids were following him all over the place, and every kid had a Junior Ranger badge. We both knew that was certainly not within state park policy, that they had not earned the badge through the proper Junior Ranger program. I leave it up to Steve to show up with a bag. Hey, look what I found. He passed his knowledge and his enthusiasm for parks and nature to a new generation of rangers in the middle of Central Asia. He taught them first aid, interpretation, how to post boundary signs, how to throw a frisbee, which they've never even seen before. Steve did not speak Mongolian. Steve spoke the universal language of a smile, pantomime, a handshake, and laughter. He didn't drink and he didn't smoke, but he sure could act crazy, and we all loved him for it. My brother Paul, who was notoriously cheap, once offered Steve $20 to not use a pun for 30 minutes. Steve thought for a minute and then he said, "Nope, can't do it." I know my brother wouldn't have paid him anyway. I loved Steve Bier unconditionally. We shared many days, many nights, and many inner thoughts. We never once had a crossword with each other. And as scary as it seems, we were on the same wavelength sometimes. We shared a deep love of this town and of Anza-Borrego Desert State Park. This park and this community will never be the same again. Unconditional love means that I respect Steve's decision to find his final peace out in the desert that he loved. He broke our hearts, but I can't be angry with him, only sad. I accept that he's gone. Could never once again shake his hand. He had the biggest hands I've ever seen on a non-NBA player. His fingers were 1.5 inches longer than mine. The last time my wife Kelly and I ever saw him was right out here during the wildflower craziness. Kelly and I were at our secret spot that nobody knew about. And over the dunes on a dirt road comes a white Chevy patrol vehicle, and out from the truck comes Ranger Steve. Smiles. Great to see him. Had his camera in his hand, of course. And luckily, we each gave him a big hug that day when we left. And we said, please take care of yourself. That's the last we ever saw him. We can honor Ranger Steve by carrying on his love of his family and caring for his wife and his dear son, by carrying on his love of this place that we call home, and carrying on his mission of enlightening our young people and caring for this planet. Steve left this world, but he will be here with us forever. As his brother so poignantly said, that Steve is here and he's going to be with each one of us. He left us with the task of carrying on his work. Those are big shoes to fill. Every time you have a chance to help a kid learn about nature, take it. Every time you take a picture, think of Ranger Steve. Every time I pick up a camera now, I think of Steve. I pick up the binoculars, I think of my brother Paul. And I think, well, those are two pretty good partners to have wherever you go in the world, even though you can't see them again. Steve's loving, outgoing nature, his big firm handshake, his smile, his dedication, and his friendship will be with us every day. He has left us better than we were. And when you miss him, fill that big empty place in your heart with gratitude for the days that we did get to spend with him. I salute you, my friend, State Park Ranger Steve Bier.
Thank you, Mark. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time out of their day to be here to honor not just Steve, but Steve's family. I think it was great for them to see the show of love that this community has for our awesome partner, colleague, and friend. It is a peace officer tradition to have our dispatchers note the loss of an officer. The Southern Communications Center, we call SERCOM, did the honors for Steve, and we would like to play that for you now.
R1196, SERCOM. R1196, SERCOM. R1196, SERCOM. Ranger Stephen Bier, badge number 1196. We thank you for your dedication and loyalty to California State Parks, its employees, the people of California, and mostly to Anza-Borrego Desert State Park, where you played ranger with the utmost pride and professionalism. You influenced many and gained the respect of everyone you crossed trails with. Your contributions to California State Parks have left an enduring mark on the department, its officers, for generations to come. Ranger Steve, you will be missed. Rest easy, sir. We've got it from here. Stephen Bier. End of watch. March 29th, 2017. The circle is clear.
I thank Borrego Springs High School for allowing us to have this ceremony here today. It's great to see the presence of all of Steve's students, all of his co-workers, his friends. It's awesome. Please remember to keep him in your hearts as you tell and continue to tell his stories. Use his puns liberally. Tell his jokes. They never get old, even though they're dorky. Spend the time afterwards to write on the storyboard, to say meaningful things to each other, because that's what a get-together like this is all about. We will now conclude with the salute to Steve Bier's military service, with the presentation of the flag. This flag was flown over the Anza-Borrego Desert State Park Visitor Center over the weekend to honor Steve.
left, 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 right, left. Right bears, covered flag. Forward, we're north. Left. Color guard. About face. Rifle squad, 10 hook. Port arms. Safety's off. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Aim. Two. Retire the colors. Color guard. Right. Face. Port arm. Over. March. Left. Left. Order, arm. Parade, rest. Hold on.
Remember, Steve, support each other, love each other, and thank you for coming today. This ends our service for Steve.